This was a day for negotiation at the White House. Negotiations require pressure and, importantly, a desire for different outcomes. Experience reminds us that even when a breakthrough is announced, momentum sometimes recedes, and the status quo presses stubbornly forward. At the White House today, President Trump leaned on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to apologize to Qatar for an Israeli airstrike that violated Qatari sovereignty as it targeted Hamas leaders engaging in negotiations there. That was a precondition to Qatar to move to the next step with other Arab nations to support a White House-drafted peace deal, 20 points in all, to end the war in Gaza and gain the release of Israeli hostages, living and dead, as well as to a phased military withdrawal from Gaza, Israeli military withdrawal, and expanded humanitarian assistance inside Gaza. This deal is a framework with all the fragility that word implies in the Middle East, meaning each line subject to interpretation. Among the biggest asks, Hamas must disarm and play no role in a future of Palestinian governance, a stipulation that the Hamas leadership has yet to accept. Now, in its weakened state, Hamas may, I emphasize may, have to agree or risk incurring the wrath or indifference of historically sympathetic Arab nations. If Hamas says no, Netanyahu has vowed to carry the war in Gaza forward for as long as it takes. The other negotiation? With Congress over government funding. The White House and Congress, controlled entirely by Republicans, are on the verge of a shutdown that could limit basic federal services and result in sizable firings within the federal workforce, possibly firings much larger than those carried out thus far in the name of DOGE. What Trump wants and what levers congressional Democrats possess or merely imagine they possess was just tested face-to-face for the first time. Bipartisan congressional leaders just wrapped up a meeting with Trump at the White House. We have invited a House Republican and House Democrat to debate the various shutdown scenarios and potential ways out. Even by Trump standards, today was an eventful day at the White House. To guide us through it all, we turn to Ed O'Keefe. Ed O'Keefe, on the North Lawn of the White House, great to see you. Let's go through what happened in the Middle East. I want to play for our audience sound, first from President Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, both playing off what Hamas must do and what Hamas may face. Listen.
Everyone understands that the ultimate result must be the elimination of any danger posed in the region, and that danger is caused by Hamas. The tyranny of terror has to end, and this is, again, something that we're looking for. This is eternity. This is for forever.
I think we should understand that we're giving everybody a chance to have this done peacefully, something that will achieve all our war objectives without any further bloodshed. This can be done the easy way, or it can be done the hard way, but it will be done. We prefer the easy way, but it has to be done.
Ed O'Keefe, while this was happening, there were reports of intensified Israeli airstrikes inside Gaza. So where do things stand?
Well, everyone's waiting for Hamas, basically. Major, at this point, comes public statement from them, some signal that they're willing to negotiate what is a 20-point comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict that, among other things, calls for the end of the war immediately if the two sides agree, work towards redeveloping the economy of Gaza, allowing Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence to leave Gaza and head to other countries without harm once the hostages have been released and prisoners sent back to Gaza, and all sorts of other sticking points, frankly, that while they may agree to talk about this, could spend months, if not years, negotiating over the details of this. One of the biggest ones, for example, the idea that you're going to set up a temporary transitional governance of a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee to run the place until a different kind of government can be established. It wouldn't include any members of Hamas at all whatsoever. And then this board of peace that the president says he's going to co-chair with other leaders, including the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who's remained intimately involved in these issues over the last several years, to somehow fund and oversee the policing, the establishment, the implementation of all these plans. But again, no word yet from Hamas that they've accepted this. And even if they do, as we've seen over the last several years now, talks between these two sides of a way getting started and then ultimately going nowhere.
And it seemed very important to many observers that the president today at the White House engineered a phone call in which the Israeli prime minister apologized to the leader of Qatar over the Israeli strike there, and then the Qataris signing on to this, along with other Arab nations, indicating that they were not absolving Israel of its various grievances or the grievances they have with Israel over the conduct of the war in Gaza, but were prepared to move this forward. Did that in any way suggest that there has been a shift in alignment, or is that just what the White House is hoping has been achieved?
I think what it signals is that the president has spent an awful lot of time in recent weeks talking to the leaders of predominantly Arab or Muslim nations who have made clear to him, not only do we want this done, but there's economic incentive for everybody if we do. And to get that apology and that call made between the leader of Israel and Qatar and to try to settle that was a key priority for this White House, given how much Qatar has done to host these talks to try to move Hamas towards some kind of an agreement, and the fact, of course, that it hosts the largest military installation run by the Americans in the Middle East. They're a key ally that they have to be kept happy. So that was a key development today, certainly, and another sign of Israel's ongoing engagement with the Arab world, with its neighbors there, who are also eager to see this conflict ultimately ended.